As we set forth on this journey, I feel it is important to warn you that the story to come explores mature themes. The story delves into the multifaceted experience of new motherhood, the delicate web of family relationships, and the emotional upheaval caused by infidelity. If these topics stir any unease, you might consider stopping your viewing here. In the stillness of that morning, I stood in the kitchen, my fingers tracing the smooth, cool surface of the granite countertop. The refrigerator's hum vibrated with an unexpected intensity. It could have been the quiet that wrapped around the scene, or maybe it was the weight of everything that had led to this house, this life, this moment where all seemed to align at last. For what felt like an eternity, the notion of study existed only as a fleeting illusion in my life. It was just Noah and me, maneuvering through the tight spaces of small apartments, pushing each dollar to its utmost capacity. The nights stretch in my recollection, where I sat on a worn couch, my gaze locked on the stack of unpaid bills, silently wishing he wouldn't notice the fear that held me captive. Nevertheless, he remained perpetually watchful. From an early age, Noah had an extraordinary knack for seeing straight through me. He would curl up in my lap, wrap his arms around me, and whisper that everything would be just fine. And in some unfathomable manner, it always had been. Noah's father had been a dear friend of mine, and upon his passing, Noah came to live with me. There was neither a dramatic showdown nor an elaborate exit. A man who silently slipped away from our lives, leaving no evidence of his presence. I frequently contemplated the possibility of seeing traces of him in Noah as he grew older, but Noah ultimately revealed himself to be entirely unique. He did not possess the same cool detachment or the instinct to escape. He stayed put. We tarried. In those times, the world around us felt rather confined. In a realm where the very walls seemed to murmur, the pursuit of secrets proved to be a fruitless endeavor, leading us to relinquish the idea altogether. Our discussion wandered through a multitude of subjects. I addressed his questions, no matter how uncomfortable they may have been. He entrusted me with secrets that many children would hesitate to share with their parents. It was just how the narrative was destined to progress. We supported each other, and I am convinced that connection has persisted. As he matured and developed, it was remarkable to witness the extent of his growth. I never felt the subtle shift that signaled his departure. While his friends embarked on their escapades, Noah made the decision to remain at home with me. He relished our time together, diving into conversations and exchanging jokes that were so awful they somehow evoked laughter from me all the same. I also found it quite enjoyable. His presence enveloped me in a comforting warmth that I deeply cherished. At times, it may feel quite overwhelming. Perhaps that sheds light on my deep dive into fitness. It went beyond superficial appearances. A surge of power coursed through me, instilling the belief that I could confront anything that awaited on the horizon. Every morning, I welcomed the cadence of my runs, immersed myself in the power of weightlifting, and started to care for myself in the way I genuinely deserved. It demonstrated its effectiveness. My well-being has noticeably improved. I seemed more attractive. Onlookers made their observations. I took note. That confidence awakened a deep-seated feeling within me. It sparked a longing within me that went beyond the basics of existence. I have come into possession of this house, which features generous space, plentiful light, and a tranquil ambience. I promised myself to release any guilt associated with it. I have rightfully earned it. Noah was bound to face the consequences. Thereafter, I obtained the hot tub. At first glance, it appeared rather ludicrous to allocate such a substantial amount towards something so extravagant. In light of all I had faced, it felt entirely appropriate. I notified Noah about it before I placed my order. He offered a warm smile and urged me to treat myself just a bit. To my astonishment, I discovered that he appeared indifferent, while my emotions ran profoundly deep. On that first night, I settled in, staying there until my fingers took on the appearance of prunes. It felt like irrefutable proof that I had truly arrived. With the weekend drawing near, my anticipation to spend it with Noah became overwhelming. I gently hinted at the enjoyment it offered, reassuring him that it would ease his muscles after a workout. He persisted in dismissing it, asserting that he probably wouldn't find it beneficial. However, when I asked again after dinner, he finally agreed. That should have marked the conclusion of the matter. What was meant to be a fleeting moment of tranquility. As I retrieved my swimsuit from the drawer, I hesitated, not due to the fabric I held, but rather the realization of how long it had been since I embraced the comfort of my own skin. Neither wrong nor correct, simply unique. I stood before the mirror, examining my reflection with a depth of focus that was unusual for me. Adjusted the straps. I delicately ran my fingers through my hair. I comforted myself with the thought that my excitement was simply for the hot tub. It was unwise to consider any alternative idea. Yet, a subtle tremor coursed through my hands as I carried our drinks outside. The night wrapped itself in an unusual warmth, while the breeze softly murmured through the atmosphere. With careful precision, I carried 2 glasses outside, acutely aware of the risk of spills, and set them gently on the edge of the hot tub. Noah was already present, lounging against the smooth contour of the tub, as though this were a ritual he had mastered through the passage of time. He seemed effortlessly relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in quite a while. Shoulders at ease, eyes gently wandering. "I assured you it would be a pleasure," I said, as I entered the soothing warmth of the water, allowing the steam to envelop me. The silence enveloped me, a serene embrace that made me acutely aware of my own presence, as if the mere flicker of my reflection acknowledged my existence. His eyes flicked upward for a fleeting instant before settling back on the bubbling water beneath. I masked my curiosity as I allowed my toes to graze the water's surface. "I must confess, it exceeded my expectations," he remarked, swirling his drink with a contemplative air. "Nevertheless, I will hold onto this position. The jets appear to be arranged perfectly." "Oh, really?" I immerse myself in the water, leaning back as the warmth wraps around me. But do not allow yourself to descend too far into comfort. This is my domain, and I am determined to take it back." "You snooze, you lose," he replied, a playful grin spreading across his face. An exasperated sigh escaped my lips, but a smile slowly emerged despite my frustration. It had been a while since we found ourselves in this moment, exchanging words, laughter, and a feeling of comfort. It evoked memories of those evenings spent snuggled on the couch, enveloped in the laughter of beloved classic sitcoms. His feet would inevitably creep toward my side, compelling me to yield and let him stretch out at ease. This was the sole element that seemed distinct. Perhaps it was the oppressive heat, or the way the water made every movement feel slow and heavy. It might have been the way his shoulders pressed against the edges of the tub, hinting that he was nearly too big for the confines of that space. "Very well," I replied, drawing closer. "If you stay put, then let me observe what renders this place truly extraordinary." As we shifted our seats, an immediate wave of regret enveloped me. The jets expertly focused on all the ideal zones: the lower back, shoulders, and legs. He shot me a look that implied he was acutely conscious of what he had let go. "I told you," he remarked, raising his glass for another sip. "It has slipped from your grasp. Would you like to make a bet?" I leaned closer, pretending to reach for his arm, but he pulled back, laughter bubbling up from his lips. In a heartbeat, we were ensnared in a spirited tussle, water spilling over the edges as I lunged for his arm, only for him to skillfully brush my hands away. "Very well," he remarked, lifting his drink to shield it from any potential danger. "You stand triumphant. Please have a seat now." With a surge of anticipation, I replied, and before I knew it, I found myself seated beside him, nearer than I typically would. The atmosphere changed, not strained, but distinctly foreign. Something had shifted between us, an unnameable change lingering in the air. My heart stumbled, yet I held my ground. He didn't either. I comforted myself with the thought that it was trivial. Embracing warmth, enveloping moisture, and an all-consuming intimacy. That was everything there was to it. The rhythmic pulse of my heartbeat resonated in my ears as I shifted, searching for a hint of solace. With every step I took, the truth revealed itself more and more clearly. "My apologies," he interrupted unexpectedly. His voice emerged as a soft whisper, quivering with doubt. "I never meant to do that. It is entirely acceptable." I cut him off, doing my best to keep a casual facade. "Simply the jets. Relax." He seemed far from comfortable. His face bloomed with color, and he turned his eyes away from mine. A flicker of guilt washed over me. However, beneath that surface, something more profound lingered: expectation. His gaze in that moment held me spellbound, filled with apprehension and uncertainty. It felt like I had unearthed a concealed power within myself, a force that had lain in wait until that precise moment. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "this wouldn't have happened if you had just given my seat back." He let out a chuckle, and though the tension eased, it still hung in the atmosphere. He quietly slipped away from beneath me, murmuring something about the need for another drink, and emerged from the tub. I watched him leave, my eyes holding on longer than they should have. As he disappeared into the shadows, I released a breath tinged with doubt. What was that? I leaned back against the edge, my body buzzing with a residual vitality. It might have been harmless. It may not have been. Regardless of the circumstances, it remained a constant presence in my mind. That moment left me feeling uneasy. His wide-eyed expression reflected my own bewilderment, not a fervor, but a dread of something unarticulated beginning to grow. As he finally stepped into view, the moment had already faded, but my thoughts continued to dwell on it. I found myself returning to it, contemplating its significance, wondering if it was as untainted as I had led myself to believe, or if it carried an entirely different interpretation. I appreciate your companionship on this journey we've shared so far. This narrative has proven to be quite intricate, and I sincerely appreciate your readiness to listen. If this video speaks to you, or if you know someone who might find value in the insights I'm sharing, I encourage you to take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely inspires me to keep sharing stories like this, reminding me that I am not alone on this journey. Let us refocus on the matter before us. I comforted myself with the thought that it was trivial. It was undeniably a peculiar moment. Comfort, drinks, and a wealth of experiences shared in a cozy nook. It was simply that. As dawn broke, I awoke with the events swirling in my mind. His gaze held steady on me, a tapestry woven with nerves, embarrassment, and perhaps a whisper of something more profound. At that moment, I found myself wrapped in a charming blend of exhilaration, admiration, and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. It was never my intention to tease him, at first not in the slightest. Yet the idea lingered, captivating in its hold. It began with a whisper. As I prepared breakfast, I found myself clad in nothing but a tank top, unencumbered by a bra. He said nothing, but I caught a look not quite readable. I felt self-conscious, unsure if it was real or simply my own projection coursing through my veins. The exhilaration evolved into a routine. Leggings have taken the place of sweatpants. Hoodies have been supplanted by low-cut tops. I leaned down to pick up items with greater frequency, extended my stretches a bit longer when I sensed his gaze, and sought out opportunities to pass by him just a touch nearer than required. I reassured myself that it posed no danger, merely a game. Yet with each session, my fondness for it deepened. As Christmas approached, an unmistakable shift hung in the air. The atmosphere surrounding us felt dense, electric. It transcended mere outfits and fleeting glances. The humor was what captivated me, his playful banter in return, testing the limits to discover how far I would allow it to unfold. "Careful, Mom," he said one night as I leaned over the couch in my leggings and tank top. "You are about to bring joy to someone's day." "Oh, please," I retorted, rolling my eyes. One might assume that after 2 decades, familiarity would have settled uncomfortably between us. It doesn't imply that I lack vision. That brought me to a halt. He uttered it with such nonchalance as if it were nothing of consequence. Yet it was. A wave of unease washed over me, and I averted my gaze before he could catch a glimpse of my expression. Once more, the hot tub was a topic of conversation following dinner one evening. This time, the question didn't even need to be posed. Before I could utter a single word, he swiftly gathered the drinks and towels. I chose a pink bikini, more daring than the one I donned previously, and stood waiting for him outside. As he entered, his gaze darted downward for just a fleeting moment, yet it was sufficient to bring a smile to my face. "Whoa, are you sure that swimsuit's safe?" he joked, trying to keep it light. I laughed, but something about the comment stayed with me longer than it should have. "Oh, cease this," I chuckled as I submerged into the water. "I would never wish to cause you any distress. Trust me, it would be far more traumatic for you." The words lingered in the air, more substantial than the vapor ascending from the surface of the water. Neither of us made a move to push, yet the tension throbbed in the space that separated us. I made a light-hearted comment about changing seats once more, but he quickly dismissed the idea. "Absolutely not," he exclaimed. "Not again. Not after what happened last time. What transpired during our last encounter." I leaned in, tilting my head. He mentioned that his face was turning red. A miniature version of myself has chosen to partake in the festivities. I found myself laughing, perhaps a touch excessively. "I appreciate the compliment." His face flushed an even deeper shade of crimson, and I chose to let the matter rest. Yet, as he emerged and I caught sight of him through his damp shorts, that familiar thrill surged within me once more. Following Christmas, I discovered yet another reason to delay matters. A sauna I had chosen as a present for my own enjoyment. Noah volunteered to handle the setup, and I ensured I remained nearby as he went about his task. I leaned against the doorway, clad in a crop top and shorts, observing him as he meticulously tightened the screws. "Oh, Mr. Handyman," I whispered, letting my fingers glide softly along his arm. "How will I ever be able to repay you?" He let out a dismissive chuckle, but I noticed the brief flicker of his gaze lingering on my legs before he shifted his focus back to the instructions. I let it hang in the air for a brief moment before pulling back. The day after the construction was finished, I asked him if he would like to join me in testing it out. He hesitated briefly, yet I encouraged him. "Come on, you brought this to life. You ought to find some joy in it." That accomplished the task. I slipped into a pair of shorts and a tank top, reveling in the liberating sensation of going braless. Just enough to keep the game's momentum alive. He stepped in wearing gym shorts, his torso bare, a figure of manhood that starkly contrasted with the boy I once nurtured. We settled into the sauna, our legs brushing against one another, and I sensed my heart begin to race. I reclined slightly and said, "You've done an outstanding job in here. Are you absolutely sure there's nothing more I can provide?" With a smile, he said, "I have a rather important issue that you might assist me with." I blinked, momentarily surprised, but before I could find my voice, he brushed it aside with a casual wave of his hand. I was merely jesting, naturally. I had presumed our guest had made his return. I quipped, stealing a glance at his shorts. His eyes flickered to my chest for a brief instant, but that was all it took to send a shiver racing across my skin. "It appears you're not the only one entertaining visitors," he replied, his eyes lingering on the subtle silhouette of my nipples through the sheer fabric. I stood tall, attempting to conceal the flutter of nerves behind a casual smile, uncertain of whether my performance was for him or for my own sake. It often happens after a workout. The timer chimed, breaking the serene silence that enveloped the moment. He was the first to rise, and I followed closely, our bodies grazing against one another as we made our way out. He stayed put. "Maybe I'll join you for a workout next time," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I would cherish that," I replied, though the words felt laden with a significance that transcended their simple meaning. That night, I found myself in bed, a wave of restlessness washing over me. A fragment of my being longed to pause, to establish a boundary and return to the known, while another part hungered for the exhilaration of transcending limits, eager to uncover the extent of my endurance before something inevitably shattered. I had no intention of bringing it up, especially not in the way it ultimately transpired. After everything that had unfolded, the playful jabs, the moments in the sauna, the lingering glances, I could not ignore it, and he felt the same. Begun in the very center of the household. While rinsing the dishes, I found myself dressed in a tank top and shorts, the echoes of my morning workouts still lingering on my skin. Noah moved behind me to grab a glass, and for an instant, our arms grazed against each other. It was nothing, yet it lingered, a subtle pressure that unveiled the truth. It was no mere accident. I lingered for a brief instant, a rush of warmth coloring my cheeks, but I stayed rooted in place. "You're certainly making a statement today," he remarked, a hint of awkwardness in his grin. I chuckled outwardly, yet within, a tension was brewing. "Oh, you noticed, did you?" I replied, making an effort to keep my voice steady. Avoiding that proves to be quite a challenge. In that instant, the course of everything shifted irrevocably. He hesitated, as if in pursuit of the ideal phrasing, then asked nonchalantly, though it was evident he was uncertain about the limits of his expression, which aspects met expectations, and which ones did not quite measure up. The air felt as if it had been siphoned off, resulting in a disquieting stillness that lingered heavily around. He sought permission, delving into the depths, and I could no longer pretend that this was simply a product of my imagination. Ultimately, I proclaimed, "Words carry no weight. Do not hesitate to share whatever thoughts arise within you. If anything crosses the line, we'll just deem it a misguided attempt at humor and move forward." He seemed to embody a blend of relief and anxiety. I felt the tempest of ideas swirling within him, prompting me to delve a little deeper. "What does touch signify?" I asked. "What is deemed acceptable in that context?" He paused, his throat tightening as he forced himself to swallow. "I find myself in a state of uncertainty. Let's speak candidly. If anything ever feels uneasy, we express it clearly. No jokes, no pretense. That is our rule. When a sense of unease arises, we pause. Absolutely no more. Authenticity reigns." He emitted a brief, anxious chuckle, but he nodded in assent. "Indeed, I concur." I comforted myself with the thought that it was simply innocent, a fanciful agreement crafted between two souls who had perpetually nurtured a profound connection. However, the moment held a significance that transcended mere words. My stomach twisted in knots as I confronted the pile of dishes, pretending not to notice the intensity of his gaze resting upon me. It wasn't long before we decided to put it to the test. As the night deepened, I was loading the dishwasher when, out of nowhere, I felt his hand brush against my hip, quick but purposeful. I sprang up, crashing straight into him. He held his position firmly. Instead, he lingered a moment longer, and the air around us grew heavy, as if time itself had paused. I looked up at him, my eyes wide with unspoken thoughts. "It seems someone's feeling bold," I observed, my voice slipping to a lower register than I had meant. He shot back that it was fine, but the flush on his face revealed a contrasting truth. A furtive glance over my shoulder preceded my departure, but the warmth remained, an echo of what had just transpired. Not even after he left to be with his companions. That evening, I delved into my closet, pulling out skirts, dresses, and tops that had sat untouched for years. I yearned for his gaze. An irresistible compulsion to keep pushing forward surged within me. As the sun rose on a fresh day, I embarked on exactly that endeavor. Descending the stairs, I donned a fitted blouse and skirt that had remained untouched in my wardrobe for years. I reassured myself that it was merely for my own sake, a subtle act of defiance against the sensation of being unseen. Just the perfect number of buttons left undone to ignite the imagination. He lingered in the kitchen, clad in little more than a haze of slumber, his eyes heavy with the remnants of sleep. I playfully remarked that my outfit was a bold fashion statement. He chuckled, yet we both sensed the unspoken tension lingering in the atmosphere, the sort that was better left undisturbed. He smiled, but I noticed the slight shift in his gaze. He had stopped making jokes. As he passed, his hand brushed against my lower back, and I leaned into the contact, subtly signaling my approval. The days that followed unfolded in a familiar cadence, marked by subtle gestures, lingering glances, and remarks that danced tantalizingly near the boundaries we both knew were wiser left unexamined. He became increasingly audacious, and I mirrored his courage. "You're going to get me in trouble," he remarked one evening, his voice laced with a hint of playful admonition as I leaned down to retrieve an item from the floor. "Perhaps I wish to," I replied, straightening my posture and turning to face him. "You look nice," he said, his voice tinged with an uncomfortable sincerity. I chuckled, yet the compliment hung in the air, stretching its stay far beyond what felt appropriate. As the week came to an end, it had transformed into something more than just casual remarks or accidental touches. It was embraces that stretched into eternity, a soft clash in the hallways where space was abundant. His hands grazed my hips as he leaned in to grab something, and with each touch, I felt that familiar thrill, a surge of warmth and intrigue that stoked my yearning for more. Nevertheless, we found ourselves in a constant state of retreat. We would laugh, exchange a joke, and carry on as though nothing had happened. We both felt a sense of unease regarding the consequences that awaited us should we decide against taking action. Still, neither of us wanted to see it conclude. "Not at this time. I don't know what's happening," he confessed one night as we reclined on the couch, pretending to be absorbed in the flickering television before us. I mirrored the sentiment, feeling the same, yet it evokes a certain pleasure. "Indeed," he remarked, his eyes glued to the screen, though his thoughts appeared to wander far beyond its confines. "Certainly it does." We set off with a shared understanding of no obligations and no final judgments. A quiet agreement, an unspoken bond to endure, to carry on with the light-hearted exchanges, all in the quest to uncover the destination it may reveal. In spite of my determination to keep a cheerful demeanor, I couldn't help but reflect on how long we could hold back. That evening, it took me by surprise. It unfolded in ways unforeseen, yet perhaps that was precisely what made it so compelling to pause. In the warm embrace of the living room, it was merely the two of us, wrapped in a comfortable silence together. The television cast a flickering light, but neither of us was genuinely captivated by its radiance. My legs were stretched out, resting on his lap, as he unconsciously traced soft circles around my ankle. While it wasn't our first experience in such an environment, there was a palpable change in the atmosphere this time. He bore an expression of complete seriousness, devoid of any trace of jest or mockery. I wasn't either. The atmosphere was laden with unvoiced tension, a palpable heaviness suspended in the space between us, yet neither of us summoned the courage to shatter the stillness. Only when Noah finally exhaled did the silence shatter. He spoke in hushed tones, his bewilderment clear. "I find myself perplexed. What is it that you desire?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "The events that are currently unfolding leave me in a state of utter bewilderment, and this turmoil is causing me significant distress." I pulled my legs close, sitting up straight to meet his eyes. His eyes wandered, avoiding my own. His eyes were fixed firmly on the earth beneath him. His hands gripped his knees, as though he were in search of equilibrium. I admitted that I wasn't alone in this. My voice appeared to resonate, a gentle force that filled the air, even though it was scarcely more than a whisper. "I have also been striving to decipher it." He finally shifted his gaze in my direction, and in that instant, I glimpsed something raw and fervent in his eyes, a feeling that wound itself tightly within my stomach. Am I the only one experiencing this? Or do others share these feelings? He asked. I can guarantee you this is not a product of my imagination. No, I insisted, you are not. Once again, we were surrounded by silence, but this time it bore an even heavier weight. It felt fraught with danger, as though one ill-chosen word might bring the entire thing crashing down. I should have wrapped it up then, dismissed it, changed the subject, but I found myself unable to do so. I felt no inclination to do so. I feel as though I'm losing my mind, he said, running a hand through his hair. My mind often drifts to thoughts of us, to this peculiar realm we've stumbled upon. The uncertainty of its meaning fills me with fear. My breath caught in my throat, leaving me momentarily at a loss for words. But when I finally managed to speak, the words spilled forth uncontrollably. I emphasized, you're not alone in this. My experience has reflected that sentiment. His eyes widened, as though the words had taken him by surprise. To my astonishment, I heard myself speak those words, and once they slipped from my mouth, there was no turning back. I have no idea how to handle this, he remarked. His voice had taken on a softer quality now, just weaving illusions in my thoughts. Half the time, I feel an overwhelming urge to break free from this room's grasp, longing to quiet the relentless thoughts of you. In the other half, I find myself trapped, ensnared by the vividness of your memory. Though his voice dwindled, the essence of his message resonated within me with clarity. My skin burned with an intense heat, and my heart raced so wildly that I was certain he could hear its desperate cadence. I should have spoken up to bring closure to it, to recognize that we could not persist on this course, yet I chose to remain silent. Terrifies me too, I responded, but it also. A chill of apprehension enveloped me, holding me back from finishing the thought that lingered in my mind. Still, I understood that I could not fool him or my own conscience. I must admit, it brings me a profound sense of vitality. The silence wrapped around us, and for a brief instant, we both remained utterly still, not a word escaping our lips. Noah settled back, letting his head sink into the embrace of the couch. Mother of divine grace. He dragged his hands down his face, then shifted his gaze back to me. What in the world are we doing? I confessed honestly, uncertain as I was, yet I felt no inclination to stop. He looked at me with an intensity that suggested he was searching for something. Maybe a nod of approval or a glimmer of comfort to assure him he wasn't spiraling into madness. Yet, all I could provide was the stark, unembellished truth. We cannot continue to skirt around this issue indefinitely. If anything ever seems to teeter on the brink, we will pause and articulate it clearly, without pretense or ambiguity. He nodded, but the turmoil in his eyes was unmistakable, and to be honest, I felt it too. Uncertainty hung in the air regarding how much longer we could uphold the pretense of simple teasing. Yet for now, this was precisely what I desired. I longed for the intensity of his gaze as it locked onto mine, igniting a whirlwind of emotions deep within me. I should go to bed, he said suddenly, rising to his feet and running a hand through his hair. Indeed, I spoke, but neither of us took a step forward. He paused for a brief instant, seemingly awaiting my response, but I chose to remain quiet. As he finally turned and walked away, I found myself enveloped in solitude, wrestling with my thoughts, pondering whether what we had was already irreparable. The night unfolded in a haze of restless wakefulness. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation over and over until its edges began to blur into a haze of uncertainty. A wave of relief enveloped me, as though a heavy burden had been removed now that everything was exposed. However, another part of me felt more encumbered than ever. I had crossed a threshold, though it was one built entirely in my imagination, and I was left bewildered, unsure of how to navigate my way back to the familiar ground I once knew. The next morning, I found Noah in the kitchen. He lingered at the counter, fully dressed, a warm cup of coffee cradled in his hands. He looked up as I walked in, and for a brief instant, Silence wrapped around us. But there was no tension, a sharp difference from the previous night. Silence reigns supreme. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying an unusual softness. "Good morning." I extended my hand toward a mug, meticulously pouring its contents while endeavoring to keep my grip steady. His gaze lingered on me, igniting a flutter in my chest. But this time I held my ground with unwavering poise. This time it will be different. As he started to recount the events of last night, I cut him off. The conversation is essential. I turned to face him, placing my cup aside. Yet we must also embrace the truth within ourselves. He nodded, but a flicker of anxiety crossed his face, hinting at his uncertainty about the words that might spill from my lips. Honestly, I felt a sense of uncertainty too. But beneath it all, I realized that we could no longer pretend that nothing was happening. It was unmistakably clear. "I cannot endure the idea of losing you," I proclaimed, no matter the situation. "You won't," he said, swiftly moving in closer. "I solemnly swear. However, we must not persist on this course, regardless of what it entails." Though my voice quivered, I pressed on with determination. "It impacts us both, and I will not permit it to escalate to a point of no return." "What shall our next course of action be?" he asked, his voice quivering just a bit, evoking a deep sense of sadness in me. "We set boundaries, authentic ones, undeniably." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to hold their gaze. "Discontinue all communication. Put an end to the light-hearted banter. Should either of us feel that we are nearing a boundary, we will voice our concerns. Indeed, there's no ignoring it." He nodded slowly, but the uncertainty in his eyes was clear. He hesitated to let go of whatever tethered us in this intricate dance. Still, a part of me resonated with that sentiment. Nevertheless, I understood that it was essential for us to move forward and continue the chase. I reached out, wrapping my fingers around his with a gentle grip. "Please know that this is not connected to my feelings for you. Your presence kindles a flame deep within me. Understood? That moment will be forever imprinted in my mind. However, this cannot be the route by which I once again uncover that feeling. I am determined to discover what lies just out of reach beyond the boundaries of this dwelling. Beyond our limits." His shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Finally, after days of separation, I laid eyes on the boy I had raised, the person who entrusted me with their faith. Leaning against me, they looked up with an earnest gaze. Not the man who had been looking at me as though I were an unfamiliar face. "I understand," he said, squeezing my hand in return. "My feelings resonate completely with yours." Words eluded me in that moment. "We shall be fine," I proclaimed, and I genuinely held that conviction. "It is crucial that we maintain its current condition." He wrapped his arms around me, a comforting embrace that radiated warmth. It felt as though we had wrapped ourselves in this embrace 1,000 times over, in the same manner as all those who preceded. As he pulled away, a palpable change hung in the atmosphere. Increased buoyancy. It seemed we had at last unshackled the tension that had held us captive for weeks. Subsequently, he set off to meet up with a few companions. I stood before the mirror, allowing myself a moment to genuinely scrutinize my reflection, not just at my body, but at everything that envelopes it. The soft glow in my eyes, the way my hair flowed gracefully around my shoulders, the glow of my skin, effortlessly radiant even in its unadorned form. After many years, I finally discovered a profound sense of beauty within myself. In great demand, it was entirely unrelated to Noah. Not exactly. His talent lay in his capacity to conjure the feeling of being truly observed. In that instant, I made a solemn promise to myself. I would not let that feeling fade into oblivion. I would seek out ways to preserve its vigor. Amidst new experiences, captivating personalities, and the possibility of a blossoming romance when the moment seemed perfect. However, it would not be through his actions. It was utterly impossible. As Noah stepped through the door that night, we effortlessly fell back into our well-worn routine. An evening of dinner, television, and effortless dialogue. Once again, it felt as if everything flowed effortlessly. Warm and inviting, it felt as though we had unearthed the very trail that guided us back to each other. Even if we had given up something along the way. As I lay back in bed that night, a multitude of thoughts danced through my mind. Every one reverberates with the inquiry. What if? What if we permitted it to reveal itself even further? What if we had dared to cross that threshold? What if the part of me that craved knowledge remained, never fully receding into the shadows? Uncertainty shrouds my journey, yet I remain keenly attuned to the complexities of my circumstances. I am driven to share this for a particular reason. It is possible that there is someone out there with a viewpoint I have not yet contemplated. If you have faced a situation like this, or know someone who has, I would truly value your thoughts. At times, clarity slips away when we are deeply immersed in the chaos. This stands as a powerful reminder. Loneliness often guides you to unforeseen places. Proceed with care before crossing a threshold from which retreat is impossible. Your readiness to listen is truly valued. Your thoughts hold great worth, so feel free to share them openly.